Michelle.
All right. Well, listen, it is so delightful to see all of you. It just reinforces that we have a big election coming up in November, not only at the federal level, but here in the state of Florida. And so just so excited to see this turnout tonight. And delighted that BPW is partnering with the League of Women Voters. So let me introduce myself. My name is Michelle Cavallo. I am the president of BPW Florida. And I am going to just recognize not only do we have members who are joining us tonight from all over the state of Florida, but we have a lot of guests with us as well. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for seizing this opportunity to be a more informed voter. Tonight's program is being brought to you by BPW and the League of Women Voters. But before I turn it over, I want to share a little bit about BPW. Business and Professional Women was founded in 1919, and our mission is to achieve equity in the workplace through advocacy, education, and information. Through our Public Policy Committee, which is chaired by Corey Adler Leitersdorf. Thank you, Corey, for tonight. This is pretty terrific. We are delighted to bring you this program. We have, again, as I said, we have local organizations throughout the state. And if you do not live near a local organization, we have members at large. And there's program available to all. So if you'd like to learn more about BPW, you can always visit our website, BPW, it's the bpwfl.org. Chandra will put that in the chat. And you'll also be receiving an email at the conclusion of the program tonight that will share some more information about BPW. But without further ado, let's get to it. About tonight. So in preparation for the November 5th general election, BPW Florida welcomes the League of Women Voters to present this nonpartisan explanation of each of the 6 amendments on our statewide ballot. The League's Kathy Swerdlow will help cut through the advertising and rhetoric to help attendees make informed choices when we vote in November. Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just kind of curious, how many people know much about League of Women Voters? Because the first couple of slides talk about it, and if you all know, I'll go quick. But I'm really delighted to be here. I am the president of the League of Women Voters for Seminole County in Central Florida and a member of the Speakers Bureau. And I'm going to go ahead to our PowerPoint. We practiced this and we saw that it worked. So I want to make sure it will again. There we go. Is everybody seeing that?
It looks great.
Okay, thanks. Now, the only thing that's not happening is I'm not seeing what I need. Oh, I think I can manage. So we're going to talk about the 6 amendments that are on the general election ballot. And along the course of this discussion, I'll reference the fact that there may be more things on your individual ballot, but because this is a presentation that's going out throughout the state, I've just limited it to the statewide ballot initiatives. And let me see if I can fix that. So the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan but political nonprofit organization. We also are established in 1920. I mean, this must have been quite the time to be a woman, the late 19-teens and the early 1920s. Men have been welcome since 1972, and in fact, 20% of our membership are men today. In Florida, we have 29 local leagues throughout the state, and we also have an at-large program. We serve voters and promote good governance. Our mission statement has been kind of consolidated to be very concise. It's empowering voters and defending democracy. So we do research, educate, advocate, but we never support or oppose any political party or candidate. We do take position on issues. So you'll see as I go through the slides that there are some amendments that the league is listed as a supporter and some where we have no position. But as I go through, I'm going to just reference those, but not go into the advocacy part. This is primarily education. At the conclusion of the presentation, if anybody has any questions that kind of relate to advocacy, we can do that afterwards. So Florida elections, every 2 years, there are term limits for the governor, the cabinet, and the state legislators. Anybody know how many state senators we have? You can shout, no. So there are 40, and they are in staggering basis, that they're not all up at the same time. However, we have 120 House reps, and they have 2-year terms with an 8-year limit. And they're all elected every 2 years. So every state House of Representatives person is up for election. So what will be on our ballot? The US president, 1 Senate seat, and the 2 sides were officially decided last week. Senator Scott is up for re-election, and his opponent is Debbie Marcusel Powell. And all of the House of Representatives seats throughout the state are also up. All the state representatives are up, and half of the state senators. There will be 2 Supreme Court justices for merit retention. There'll be District Court of Appeals judges for merit retentions, and there'll be local, county, and municipal positions, and the 6 constitutional amendments. I'm in Seminole County, so in addition to the 6 amendments, we have 2 charter amendments for our county and 1 tax referendum. And that's just for the county. There are some other things that might be on in the cities. So it's important for you to know where to get that information locally. And your supervisor of election is a wonderful storehouse of information. And as we were talking before everybody came in, the league's Vote 411, which you access by just going to vote411.org. You put in your address and it takes you directly to who's on your ballot. And one of the things I just want to point out about that is there are questions that were asked of all the candidates for the various positions, and their answers were input by them. There's no editing. There's no, no mistake in transposing anything. The answers were entered directly by the candidate and or their staff. So Florida's Constitution. You may not realize it, but Florida's Constitution was established, this current version, in 1968. So the US Constitution goes back to 1791. There are 27 amendments to the US Constitution that are added after the body of the Constitution, and they're numbered 1 through 27. The last amendment passed in 1992. But Florida's Constitution has been amended since 1968 144 times. And every time it is amended, they simply change the words wherever they appear or add sections in the articles that they go to. So that you won't find a listing of 144 amendments at the end of Florida's Constitution. There are several sources for amendments: the legislature, citizen initiatives, the Constitution Revision Commission, which meets once every 20 years. There is the potential for the Taxation and Budget Reform Commission, but barely ever used. And you could call a new Florida Constitutional Convention, but that hasn't happened either. The 2 biggest ways that amendments get on the ballot are either by the legislature or a citizen's initiative. And of course, it's much harder to do the citizen's initiative than for the legislature. If the legislature gets a 3/5 approval of both chambers, then whatever it is they've proposed will automatically go on the ballot. But a citizen's initiative, you have to collect 8% of the number of voters who participated in the last presidential election So this go around, it was almost 900,000 signatures, which really means you have to collect over 1 million because not every signature will be accepted. It has to go through a curing procedure. So it's a lot of work to get a citizens initiative on the ballot. And then all of them, regardless of what their source is, all need a 60% supermajority in order to pass. So now that we've kind of given a framework, let's go to the amendments. Amendment 1. The source of this amendment is the Florida legislature. Currently, school board elections in the state of Florida, we've just had them recently last week in my county, are nonpartisan elections. The Florida legislature has put onto the ballot that they would like the school board elections to be partisan. And they were previously, but back in the 1990s, that was changed. So this slide gives you the actual text that will appear on your ballot. And rather than kind of read through all of this because it gets a little wonky, I'm going to go to the next slide, which gives a summary. So it basically changes the school board elections from nonpartisan, meaning that you do not have to qualify to the ballot through some party primary process, nor do you need to identify with a particular party. From nonpartisan to partisan. And it would begin with the November 2026 general election and the primary elections that are nominating candidates for that 2026 election. So it's the next cycle of school board elections. So one thing about that process, Florida is a closed primary state, which means that only the registered members of a particular party can vote in that party's primary. And so Republicans vote in the Republican primary and the Democrats vote in the Democratic primary, and everybody else, which is about 1/3 of the rest of the electorate, does not vote in the primaries because they're not members of that party. So a yes vote on Amendment 1 would require that partisan school board elections be held. Requires that candidates to run as partisans listing a party affiliation. Supporters of this amendment say that it increases the candidate transparency for voters because candidates would have to indicate which party they're affiliated with or indicate that they're running as an independent. A vote no for Amendment 1 maintains the status quo and allows everyone to vote for the school board elections for all candidates who qualify, regardless of party identification. And it maintains nonpartisan school board elections. The opponents, people who want you to vote no, say that school boards should be nonpartisan, that the interest of school boards is the education of our children, and that we don't need to increase polarization or politicization of school boards. And additionally, the people who are opposed to this amendment say that passage could lead to a closed election where really only voters from one party would elect the person to win the primary for that party and therefore exclude 1/3 of the voters from that process. The supporting organizations are the Florida legislature, and this was the vote for this. And of course, our Florida legislature is a supermajority of one party, and you can kind of see the way the vote is, how that stacked up. It was close to a party line vote. The opposing organizations are the Florida League of Women Voters and Common Cause. So at the end, we'll take questions, but write them down if you have any. So here's the next one. Also, the source here is the Florida legislature. And this is a constitutional amendment to put in the Constitution the right to hunt and fish. As of last year, there were a total of 23 states that had constitutional provisions that protect the right to hunt and fish. And that just as background. So here's the language. And in this case, I want to read it because there's some interesting words. Proposing an amendment to the state constitution to preserve forever fishing and hunting, including by the use of traditional methods, as a public right and preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. Specifies that the amendment does not limit the authority granted to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission under the said state article. So in summary, what it's saying is that it provides a constitutional right to fish and hunt using traditional methods. So those may be methods that currently are not deemed to be appropriate. It declares that hunting and fishing is the preferred method to manage fish and wildlife. And it also is saying at the same time that it does not limit the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's powers. What it does is provides a backdrop to those hunting and fishing regulations that if somebody wanted to contest a specific regulation, you would then have a constitutional basis upon which to do so. So a vote yes creates this constitutional right. So this is a case where this will just be added language into the Constitution because it's not there right now. Supporters say that sport fishing is an industry that's important to Florida, contributing nearly $14 billion in economic output and supports about 120,000 jobs. The amendment preserves Floridians' right to use hunting and fishing as a means to provide for themselves and their families. That was the comment by the House Speaker, Renner. And persons wishing to hunt or fish must still obtain a permit, so there'd be no lost revenue to the state. Opponents say a vote no maintains the status quo regarding fishing and hunting, which is being managed currently by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And, that we already have those kinds of things and there's nothing to be gained by a constitutional amendment. Supporters of Amendment 2 are the American Sport Fishing Association, the National Deer Association, and the International Order of Theodore Roosevelt. The legislative vote to put this on the ballot was very bipartisan. The Senate voted 38-1 and the House 116-0. So you can see there was a lot of support. Opposing organizations are a PAC called No 2 Speak Up for Wildlife, Speak Up for Wekiva. The League of Women Voters is not taking a position on that particular amendment. Next one, Amendment 3. This is one I'm sure we've all heard a lot about already. This is a citizens' initiative, and it's to legalize marijuana for adults 21 years or older. It allows personal use of marijuana. Currently, it is only medical marijuana. Individuals would be allowed to possess up to 3 ounces, which is about 85 grams, without being subject to, because things are still illegal in other amounts. The existing medical marijuana treatment centers would be authorized under this initiative to sell marijuana to adults for personal use. The medical marijuana was also a ballot initiative in 2016, and that passed with a vote of 71% to 29%. The summary of Amendment 3 is that it allows adults 21 or older to possess, purchase, or use marijuana products and accessories maintains the violations of the federal law because there is no federal statute that says that marijuana use is legal federally, establishes possession limits, defines terms, and provides an effective date. The effective date, I believe, is 6 months after the approval. Yes, 6 months after the approval of this amendment. So the proponents say that a vote yes legalizes non-medicinal use of marijuana for adults 21 years old and older and allows possession of up to 3 ounces. Other use or possession remains a crime. So here, what are some of the things that supporters say? They say that there's no evidence that legalizing marijuana for medical or recreational use at the state level has a negative impact. 37 other states have already done so. The continued black market sale of marijuana perpetuates a culture of criminality, that if legalized, Florida users will have accountability and transparency and regulations in place. The amendment does not forbid the legislature from regulating the public use of marijuana. The legislature retains the power to enact regulations to ensure clean, family-friendly public spaces, just as it does with tobacco and alcohol use. And legalization also leads to decreased rate in gangs committing violent crimes. Violent crimes in states where marijuana was legalized dropped 12.5%. And in fact, the continued illicit market sale of marijuana perpetuates a culture of criminality. That was from an article in the Tampa Bay Times. A vote no maintains the status quo of marijuana regulated for medicinal use only. So what is it that opponents say? It says the medical patient doesn't belong in the same arena as the recreational. And although recreational will use it for medicinal purposes, but it does get a little convoluted and confusing. That's the whole reason we want to try to keep it as separate as possible. This is from a medical marijuana dispensary owner. It's not fair for a recreational bill or movement to step on the heads of people who are sick or debilitated and who are funding those dispensaries. Those dispensaries are taking the money to foot a bill to create a recreational movement to create a profit. So that's some of their language. And Governor DeSantis has says it's a license to have it anywhere you want, no time, place, or restrictions. The state will start to smell like marijuana in all our cities and towns. However, you did see in the previous slides that the legislature could still regulate public use and consumption like it does tobacco and alcohol. Supporting amendments are the True Leave Company and Smart and Safe Florida. Opposing are Drug Free America Foundation, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and Floridians Against Recreational Marijuana. The next amendment, also one that you've probably heard a lot about already, is Amendment 4. It is also a citizens' initiative amendment. In June of 2022, when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision, it turned the policy back to the states in terms of regulating abortion access. Since then, there have been 7 ballot measures addressing abortion on a state ballot. 4 of those measures were approved by voters. In November, Maryland will also put this abortion on their ballot. This is the text. No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. So in summary, it guarantees access until fetal viability as determined by the healthcare provider. Viability is not defined here because it is a medical term that is best defined by the medical community. And it is really kind of a moving target. I remember when Roe was passed in the 70s, people thought in terms of 28 weeks of gestation, and now it's lower than that because things have improved. It allows abortions when necessary to protect the patient's health, and it maintains the legislature's authority to require parental or guardian notification. A vote yes establishes a constitutional right to abortion before fetal viability. All Florida, the supporters say all Floridians deserve the freedom to make personal medical decisions free of government intrusion. There are many reasons women seek an abortion: failed birth control, rape, incest, or carrying a pregnancy to term that would endanger their lives. For all these reasons, there needs to be clear access to important health procedures to protect the life of the mother and to respect her medical decisions without government interference. A vote no maintains the status quo that is currently in effect in Florida, banning abortions at 6 weeks. Opponents say the amendment does not require that an actual MD determines if an abortion is necessary to protect a mother's health or if the fetus is viable, just any healthcare provider. So of course, healthcare provider is a general term. It includes PAs and nurse practitioners and MDs. It does not include non-clinical abortion clinic employees. Opponents also say that passage of the amendment would allow abortion right up to the moment of birth, which is that's what they say. I'll leave it there. Supporting organizations. Floridians Protecting Freedom. That was the group that collected all of the petition signatures. ACLU of Florida, Florida Rising, Florida League of Women Voters, Men for Choice, Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida, and Catholics for Choice. Opposing organizations include the Florida Voters Against Extremism, the National Center for Life and Liberty, the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, and the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops. Amendment 5 is an amendment that was put on by the Florida legislature, and it would change the annual homestead exemption that we currently have to allow for inflation. It provides an annual adjustment for value of homestead property exemption that applies to non-school taxes. It exempts school taxes from that inflation adjustment. The adjustments would be made every January 1st, reflecting the cost of living as published by the federal government. And it would take effect in the 2025 to 2026 school year. Passage of the amendment could lead to more savings for property owners who apply for homestead tax exemptions, but could also cost local governments millions in tax loss. A vote yes establishes an annual inflation adjustment to the amount of assessed value that is exempt from property taxes. So if it's currently 50,000 and there was a 10% inflation, then it would be, somebody do the math, 50,005. I'm not quite sure. Can't do the math that fast. Amendment, a no on this amendment keeps the exemption as it is. Opponents say that it would financially undercut local governments and force more of a local tax burden onto property owners who don't have homestead exemption. Another concern is that the amendment is that there's a financial burden that will be pushed to renters due to another homestead exemption benefit for the owners. Supporting organizations was the Florida legislature. And you can see again, pretty much a party line vote. And opposing is the Florida League of Cities. Amendment 6. It's the public campaign financing amendment. The source was the Florida legislature. In 1998, Florida voters adopted Amendment 11, providing campaign financing for statewide office, so only governor, and the other 3 or 4 statewide offices. And that was approved with a 64% supermajority. In 2010, the legislature tried to repeal that constitutional provision. Only 52% of voters voted in favor of repeal, and therefore the measure failed. Public financing in Florida is available for the offices of governor and elected cabinet, the attorney general, the chief financial officer, and the commissioner of agriculture. The public campaign is funded through the General Reserve Fund. And in the 2022 expenditure limit for gubernatorial candidates, there was $2 per registered voter, or $30 million. The limit for cabinet members was $1 per registered voter, or $15 million. To qualify for public funds currently, a candidate must not be running unopposed, must agree to expenditure limits, can raise $150,000 for gubernatorial candidates and $100,000 for cabinet candidates. They must agree to limit loans or contributions from the candidate's personal funds to $25,000 and contributions from political parties to $250,000. And they must report campaign financing data to the Division of Elections and submit those for a post-election audit. This is the text proposing the repeal of the provision in the state constitution that requires public financing. The summary is that it would repeal the constitutional provision for public campaign financing. A vote yes repeals the provision, and a vote no maintains the provision for public financing. So if you want to keep that we have a public financing option, you would have to vote no. Opponents say that it is designed to allow people with limited funds to run with taxpayer support, thereby expanding the field of people who might be interested in running for state office. I'm going to just run through these briefly, but I hope you all are aware that there are 3 ways to vote in Florida. You can vote by mail, which doesn't mean that you have to mail it. You can use a drop-off box or bring it to your supervisor of elections. You can vote early in early voting days, which vary by county, and you can vote at your precinct on election day. On election day, you must vote at your precinct. The early voting sites are usually county-wide. If you're voting in person on election day, the polls open at 7 and close at 7. I recently worked the polls for the primary, and we had a man race into the precinct at 6:59. He was the last person through the door. He was out of breath. We were like, oh, you just made it. You just made it. And then he was in the wrong precinct and he couldn't vote. I felt so bad for him. But you must vote in your precinct, and you must present photo and signature identification. And there is a voter protection hotline that is in effect during early voting and during the election. Early voting in person. They have limited locations, days, and times. The same procedure required, photo and signature identification, and there are drop boxes available at the early voting sites. A vote by mail or absentee voting, you can request that online, or usually you can request by calling your supervisor of election, using their online form, or downloading a paper form and mailing it in. You have to provide identification. You can check your registration status. You can track your ballot. I dropped off my ballot at the early voting drop box, and the next day I had an email from our supervisor of election telling me that my ballot had been received, processed, and counted. If you received a vote by mail ballot in the 2022 election, it does not carry forward for the 2024 election. The law was changed in Florida. Previously, you could go from one presidential election to the next, or in other words, 4 years on one vote by mail request. But now you must make a new request every general election. So if you did it for the 2022, you have to do it again for the 2024. You must sign the back of the envelope. You have to follow all of the instructions. You must put only one ballot into one envelope. When I went for training, they were saying that, somebody had returned his and his wife's ballot in the same envelope, and they were both thrown out because it could only have one ballot in each envelope. It has to be returned by 7 p.m. on election day. You either mail it or drop it off at early voting. You cannot drop it off on election day. On election day, you must, if you bring your ballot in, you'll have to destroy that ballot and cast one in person. You can't just hand in your vote by mail ballot. League of Women Voters is launching for this election a voter concierge program to provide one-on-one personal assistance if you need help in figuring out the whole process of how to register, understanding your ballot, where to find information, help in making a plan to vote. And basically we really want people to get out there and exercise their franchise. Your vote is your voice, and you need to use it. If you're interested in that concierge program, you can check it out on the League of Women Voters.org. You can get a personal voter guide, as I said before, with the candidates and issues on your ballot specific to your location at vote411.org. And that brings me to the end. So I'm going to stop share so I can see everybody. And do we have questions?
I'm sure that a few are gonna come in. Let's see, if you request a ballot by mail, but later decide and vote in person, what happens then?
So nothing. And it's best if you requested a ballot by mail, just leave it at home. Don't bring it with you to the precinct, because if you do, then we have to do this whole process where there's this big envelope has to get filled out. You have to rip your ballot in front of us and put it into this envelope, and each ballot has to go in its own. I mean, just don't ask. Because you can only be in possession of one ballot at a time. So if you choose not to use your vote by mail ballot, that's fine. When we check you in, we'll see that you requested one, but one has not been returned. So that's not a problem. And in fact, let's say you forgot and you just mailed it on Monday the 4th. And so now all of a sudden you're panicking and thinking, oh my God, I don't think it will arrive in time. It has to arrive to the supervisor's office by 7 p.m. in this case, the next day. You could still come, because we won't have any information that you actually submitted a ballot that way. And you'll vote in person. And if your ballot is received after 7 p.m. on Tuesday, it wouldn't get counted anyway, And even by some miracle, it arrived at the supervisor of elections overnight. The ballot that is processed cancels out any other ballot that is received. So
Very complicated here. When, do you know, when are the vote by mail ballots mailed for the upcoming general election?
generally about 30 days before. And you can request a mail-in ballot up till about, I think it's 10 to 14 days before election day, but you're cutting it close. If you request it, then it has to be mailed to you, but you can request it. And the other thing that we didn't mention is you have to be registered 29 days before the election. So you can't decide October 30th, oh, I'll register and go vote on November 5th. No, you have to be registered. Each time there's an election, you have to be registered 29 days before. So for this last primary, and I'm sorry if I'm getting in the weeds, just like,
It's very fascinating. No, you're great.
but if you went and tried to change your party after that 29-day window, I was an NPA and now I want to be a Republican because I want to vote in the Republican primary. That had to be done 29 days before. If you try to do it by going online and it's only 2 weeks before the election, you can make your party change, but you will still not be able to vote in the primary because it wasn't done 29 days before.
Are there any other questions? Oh, wait, for Amendment 6, what organizations were supporting a yes and which were supporting a no? Did you have a slide on amendments?
Yeah. Let me find that one. So the one supporting it was the Florida legislature. That's the only supporting organization, and opposing were the Florida League of Women Voters and Common Cause were the two organizations.
Hey, Kathy, this is Michelle. I asked one way early on, so I think it got lost. Regarding Amendment 4, which is the abortion amendment, in the amendment, is fetal viability defined? Or and I can Google that. I just didn't
No,
see
it's
that.
not.
It's
Not.
not.
And it's expressly there because it's a medical decision to be made by medical providers. It's it's really to keep that decision on a woman's health care between a woman and her medical provider, her family,
Thank you.
I know that's a hot button part of that amendment. So
Yeah, there are
just
many things, and I hope that if you have a greater interest, maybe you'll have another webinar with some of the people that can give you some more specific information.
Yeah, maybe we should. I mean, it is certainly a hot topic, and
Yeah, we
that'd be helpful.
The league had one last week with a reporter who'd done some stories about the impacts that even what currently exists in our state are having on women's health care. And then we also had somebody from the Yes on 4 come speak to us.
Thank you,
So
Kathy.
are there some other programs that the league offers with the League Speakers Bureau? Are they listed on the website?
I don't know whether they're all on the website, but we have a number of them. Because some, like I said, we don't support or oppose candidates or parties, but we take positions. So we have them on, like, we have a whole presentation on nonpartisan school board elections. We have lots on, various government issues. We have on mis and disinformation, because that is, of course, a huge driver. And the problem with that particular presentation is that it goes out of date like daily.
You have it done.
Look, I can now do this. But yeah, there's a lot of them, and we have stuff on, historical stuff as well. But all of the issues that are really the things that drive us in our advocacy work we have a PowerPoint on. We have a lot on the Returning Citizens Initiative and the work that is going on to restore those people's right to vote.
This is one, I'm not sure if you know about this, but someone had worked the polls in San Diego and was interested in working the polls in Key Largo, not sure where to apply down.
Well, it would be the supervisor elections for Monroe County. So I don't know where that's located, where that office is, but I'm sure that if you Google supervisor of elections, Monroe County, you'll get that. They would probably love to have you. I will just, every elections office is different. And even from county to county within the state, it's different. And then of course, between states, very hugely different.
I have a question about the signature that we have to put on the back of the envelopes. One of the things that really gets me a little worried about this is when you're older. For instance, I have a sister who has a lot of arthritis in her right hand. Her signature is unidentifiable anymore.
Right.
So if she were to send in a vote and sign the back of it, it would look like scroll. Once that gets to the department, okay, will they put it aside because they can't read it? Because what are they looking at? Our old signature?
It depends on, so what I did, because that I used to worry about this all the time because I sign my name differently. Sometimes I use middle initial, sometimes I don't, and I never remembered which way did I sign this. And I had gone somewhere for a training, and they said they pull your signature from your driver's license. And so what I did was I did online registration to update my registration. But when you do it online, it automatically is pulling your license signature. So now I know exactly what my signature is supposed to look like because it's on my license. And in fact, when we work the polls and the people hand us the license, we'll say, can you sign and make it look like this? Because a lot of people, it's the same kind of thing. But in general, she should go ahead and do that. Go ahead and vote. They do ask you to put some contact information on, because those are the things that go to the canvassing board. And if there's any question about whether the signature matches, they can give you a call and you can, help her fix that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's some great advice, Kathy. Thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to say? I know you said you want to say a little bit on advocacy for the end. Is there anything else that you'd like to say regarding advocacy before we let you go?
Well, you saw that the league took positions on a couple of the amendments. We really firmly believe that there's no need for partisan primaries and a partisan network for school boards. We firmly believe in nonpartisan school board elections. So we want that amendment not to pass. We are part of the groups that are working to protect a woman's right to health care in our state. We are concerned for the implications of what might happen if this 6-week ban is allowed to continue and women have no recourse. It's already traumatic throughout the state for many, many women, and we don't want to see that happen. And the campaign finance, there are probably hundreds of ways to get around those things that I said they had to do. You all of a sudden now have PACs and all that other kind of stuff. When that amendment was originally passed, you couldn't do that. But still, it is the only way that you can try to encourage people of lesser means to make a stab at running for something. There has to be some sort of public option. It's kind of where we stand. One other thing that I can say that's kind of advocacy is, the legislature is so big on putting these amendments on the ballot that will do away with certain parts of, property taxes, that is like, they're, but that's not where the legislature gets their money. That's where the counties and cities get their money. So they're really big about giving away that money. And then they leave the cities and counties, which is why the Florida League of Cities opposes that amendment, because it's just tying the hands of the county and city people who are trying to do their jobs with the monies that they can get through the taxes. And when the legislature keeps eroding that, it gets to be a problem.
These educational programs are just so wonderful, and we cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom
Oh,
with
my
us
pleasure.
tonight. And thank you. We see lots of applause here. So thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us. For Michelle, do you want to say a few words to close us
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I do want to, Kathy, this was so informative. I thank you. We're all better for it. And thanks to the League of Women Voters for the hard work you do. But I'd like the final words to be Corey's, because she's our public policy committee chair at the state level. And I think this was tremendous, Corey. Let's do some more of these. But I just wanted to give you a minute and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Kathy. It's so wonderful to see your face after emailing back and forth. BPW has been around about the same amount of time as the League. And the thing that I've learned over these last 30 years of being a member is when we collaborate, we're so strong.
Right.
And knowing that the League is supporting our efforts to be educated voters is really important. And our members deserve to have the opportunity to learn from people who have done the work. Certainly, I could tell them how to vote, but nobody wants that. I want people to feel educated and strong, yeah. So when they walk into to vote, that you are walking in knowing what you're doing. And so this is a fantastic turnout. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. Those who are having the watch parties, I hope you had lots of popcorn. And we're going to do this again. So Kathy, I'm going to be in touch with you to ask for your opinion. But thank you everybody so much for attending. We're really grateful.
Bye.